Now, Samach Ches Amud Aleph will begin Samach Zayin Amud Beis, the beginning of the parak. Parak Klal Gadol. Zok the Mishnah, Klal Gadol Amru b'Shabbos. There's a major principle, a major klal that's mentioned by Shabbos. The Gemara will discuss why, in particular, do we say over here Klal Gadol. Klal Gadol Amru b'Shabbos, Kol Shechech Ikar Shabbos, Ve'asa Melachas Harbe b'Shabbos Harbe Ein Achai V'Lachatas Achas. If a person does not know of the concept of Shabbos, he doesn't know that there's such a thing as Shabbos in the Torah, and he does many malachas on different Shabbos, nevertheless, he's only chayav one chatas. Now, the general principle is, on Shabbos, if a person does a malacha, he's over, and he does a malacha on Shabbos b'shoigeg, he's chayav a korban chatas. The principle in general by korban chatas is that for every separate time that the person does an avera, and he knew about it, he has to bring a separate korban chatas. For instance, if a person ate chaylev, which is also, there's a chiyuv korban chatas, and he ate it, and then he discovered his mistake, and then before he brought the korban, he again b'shoigeg forgot or didn't realize this was chaylev, and he ate it again, then he has to bring two korbanos. But if he ate chaylev and he didn't realize at all that he ate chaylev, that he did the avera, and then he again ate some chaylev, and only afterwards he found out about the two achilas, he only brings one korban. If it's behelam echad, he brings one korban. If there's two halomos, if there's two forgettings, he brings separate korbanos. Now, Shabbos has, in addition to that, Shabbos, we learn out from Gzeira Kosov that there is a shmira achas for every Shabbos, and there's a shmira that we learn out that there's a shmira for Shabbos Harbe, for many Shabbos. So minas svora, we apply the different scenarios to the different psukim. When we say there's a shmira for each Shabbos and Shabbos, meaning that if a person violated the Shabbos, he would have to bring a separate korban chatas for each Shabbos. That's when he knew about the halach of Shabbos. He knew about the existence of the concept, the mitzvah of Shabbos. But if a person didn't know at all that there's such a thing as Shabbos, so his not realizing, his forgetting, his haloma is due to the fact that he never realized that there's Shabbos. So it's only one. It's one forgetting. It's one act of not knowing. So if he never realized that there's something as Shabbos, if he does many Shabbos, one Shabbos, another Shabbos, and then at the end, someone teaches him, you know that you're a Yid, and there's Shabbos. And then all these Shabbos over the course of the weeks and months and years that he violated Shabbos, he brings one korban chatas, because that's a shmir achas l'Shabbos harbe. For many Shabbos, it's one act of not knowing, of forgetting. So therefore, if a person does not know about the concept of Shabbos, he's sheichei chikar Shabbos. Va'asa malachas harbe b'Shabbos harbe in chai v'lachatas achas. Only brings one korban. However, hayedei ikar Shabbos, if a person does know the concept of Shabbos, he does know that there's such a thing as Shabbos in the Torah, but he didn't realize that today is Shabbos. So a person, he's on an island somewhere, he doesn't have a calendar, he doesn't realize, and he knows there's a concept of Shabbos, but he doesn't know that today's Shabbos. And he does, and he does many malachas on many Shabbos, he's chayv al kol Shabbos of Shabbos. Here he's chayv for each and every Shabbos. So there's a shmira achas. This is where we apply the pasuk. There's a shmira achas called Shabbos of Shabbos. As Rashi explains, is because if he knows the concept of Shabbos, he must have known that in the intervening days, the days between each Shabbos, he must know a week goes by. If he knows there's such a thing as Shabbos, he knows a week goes by. He must have known that he passed through a Shabbos. Now, as Rashi explains, even though he may not know that he did a particular malacha on the particular day, which was Shabbos, but nevertheless, it's still considered a separate haloma, it's still considered a separate act of forgetting, because he must have known that he passed through a day of Shabbos, and therefore he must have known that he violated the Shabbos, and then when the Shabbos comes again, it's a new act of forgetting, of not realizing that today is Shabbos, so that requires a separate korban. However, Yedei Shehu Shabbos, if a person knows that today is Shabbos. He knows that today is the day of Shabbos. But what he doesn't realize is he forgot that on Shabbos you're not allowed to do this particular malacha. He forgot that on Shabbos that you are not allowed to plant on Shabbos. He forgot that you're not allowed to pick fruit from a tree on Shabbos. So Yedeyashu Shabbos v'asa malachas harbe b'Shabbos harbe, and he does many malachas on different Shabbos. Chayiv al kol av malacha umalacha. Here we say he is chayiv for each and every av malacha. He is forgetting over here. The act of forgetting over here is what? It's not one act of forgetting. It's not forgetting that the day is Shabbos, because he knows that the day is Shabbos. What is his shkaga? His shkaga is not realizing that a particular malacha is also. There are 39 avos malachas. So therefore, he's chayav for each and every av malacha. Now, if he does the same malacha, every Shabbos he picks fruit from the tree, then he's only chayav one, because it's the same haloma. It's the same act of forgetting, of not realizing that it's also to pick fruit from the tree. So therefore, if he picks fruit from the tree on many weeks without realizing in between, in the intervening period, without realizing that he was over, that he did a malacha, he's chayav one for each malacha. But if he in each on the different Shabbos, on the several Shabbos, he picked a fruit, he watered the garden, if he did other acts of malachas or different malachas, he did hoitzah, he carried the fruit out to the street, etc., etc. He did separate avos malachas on the different Shabbos. He's chayav for each and every av malacha, because there's a separate act, there's a separate shkoga, a separate act of forgetting for each of the malachas. But if he does the same malacha over and over and over again, he's not chayav a separate chatas for each of those avos malachas. He's chayav one for each malacha, for each av malacha, unless he realized between the acts, between the time that he did it from the different Shabbos, unless he realizes that he did the Avera in between them, in the intervening period, unless he realizes that he did the Avera and he's chayav chatos, he is only chayav one for each malacha, but he's chayav for each and every one of the avos malachas. He's chayav potentially 39 malachas. Now it says he's chayav, and the Mishnah says he's chayav for each av malacha. That doesn't mean that if he does separate toldos, he's not chayav. If he does 39 toldos, he's similarly chayav 39 chatos. What it means to exclude is that if he does an av malacha and the tolda of that malacha, then he's only chayav one. So for instance, if the person, he plants and then he waters the plant. So if we say that watering is a tolda of zereya, that's an av and a tolda, and then he is only chayav for one. But if he does separate toldas, he'd be chayav in each and every one. And that's what the Mishnah concludes. If a person does many malachas, me'ein malacha achas, it's one malacha, and he does a malacha, and it's told us, and several told us that apply to that malacha, you only chayav one. You're not chayav separate chatois, it's not a separate malacha. If he only does the tolda, he's chayav for the tolda. If he only does the av, he's chayav for the av. If he does the av malacha and it's tolda, then he's without, if he didn't realize in between the two that he's chayav chatos, then he's only chayav one. So that's the basic principle, how we divide up the different shkagas. If a person never realized that it's Shabbos, it's one shkaga. He's only chayav one chatas. If a person knew of the concept of Shabbos, he knew there's but he didn't know that today is Shabbos. So his act of forgetting is not realizing that today is Shabbos. He's chayav for each and every Shabbos. If a person knew that it was Shabbos, he knows that the day is Shabbos, but he's not aware of the malachas. He doesn't know that these particular malachas are also. Then his shkaga relates to not realizing a shkaga for the malacha. So he's chayav for each and every malacha separately. So potentially he could be chayav for 39 chatos, 39 of malachas. A person is chayav for separate avos. And if he does separate toldas, he's chayav for separate toldas. But an av and its tolda if there is no realization between the two that he's chayav a chatas, it's considered one haloma, then he's only chayav one chatas. See the Gemara. So the Mishnah begins with an unusual expression. It says, Klal Godol Amru Shabbos. There is a major principle mentioned by Shabbos. Why this unusual lashon? My time at Tana Klal Godol. Why does the Tana say over here, preface the Mishnah, introduce it with Klal Godol? Is it because we have on Daf Ayin Hey, the Mishnah brings another principle, and there it doesn't say Klal Godol, and relative to that Mishnah, this Mishnah is considered major. It has more principles, it has more rules in this Mishnah than it does in the Mishnah in Ayin Hey. And perhaps you'll say that's why this Mishnah says Klal Godol, as opposed to that Mishnah, which is not a major principle, not a major Klal, that's a minor one. This is a Klal Godol. So if you want to say Mishum Tekaboyla Misnei Oid Klal Tana Klal Godol, and similarly, Gabe Shvias, we see a similar lashon in the Mishnah Shvias, what talks about Shemitah, Nami Mishum Dekaboy Lemisni Oid Klal Acher, Tana Klal Godol. Similarly, it mentions Klal Godol by Shvias, because relative to the second Mishnah, the Mishnah that it mentions afterwards, the first Mishnah has more principles, so therefore it's considered Klal Godol. Well, by Meiser, it says a klal, and also relative to the following Mishnah, the first Mishnah is major, has more principles, and by Meiser it doesn't say klal godel. So apparently that's not the reason that it says godel, because apparently if it would be relative to another Mishnah in that Masechta, that's why it calls this godel. Then by Meiser you'd say the same thing. So Amar of Yosef Baravin, another approach. Shabbos u'Shviyas Tisbei Os told us. So perhaps it's not because it's relative to another Mishnah, it's relative to other halachas. Because Shabbos and Shviyas, there's avos and there's toldos. So there's major categories and minor categories. And most mitzvahs do not have avos and toldos, and they're not subdivided into all these categories. So that's why it calls a godel. So Tana Godel. Meiser, the less be Avos told us, like Tana Klal Godel. But by Meiser, it does not have Avos and told us. It doesn't say Klal and Klal Godel. Shabbos has 39 Avos Malachas. By Shvias, by Shemitah, the Avos are the main avodas in the field. That it means you can't plant, you can't harvest, and similarly by a vineyard, you can't do zoimer, you can't prune, and you can't pick the fruit. And so it has avos and toldos. But Meiser, there's no avos and toldos. The Gemara, however, Bar Kapara did Tani Klal Godel Meiser. He did learn Godel by Meiser. Well, if this is the principle, then what do you say Godel by Meiser? Why should he learn Godel by Meiser? My avos, my toldos seeker. There's no avos or toldos. Ella must be for a different reason. Ella love hainu taima must be the reason is Godol Einsher Shel Shabbos, that it means it's Godol, and that it means relative. It is talking relative. It's not relative the first Mishnah to another Mishnah. It's relative Shabbos to Shvias. There's a klal that's mentioned by Shabbos, and by Shabbos relative Shvias is Godol, because the punishment for Shabbos is greater Yosef Mishal Shvias. Because the Ilu Shabbos Isa Ben Betolish Ben Mechuber. Because by Shabbos the punishment applies, the malachas apply, the Yisurim apply, whether if something is growing from the ground or even if it's picked. It grows from growing to the ground, you can't harvest. If it's picked, you can't thresh, you can't winnow, you can't be boirer. And by Shvias, it's only an Isser on something that's connected to the ground. It's either cultivating the land, it's planting it, or it's harvesting. But once something is harvested, once the fruit is picked, the Shvias, Isser Shvias doesn't apply. The Godel Einsher Shel Shvias Yosef Min HaMeiser, and the Godel Einsher Shel Min HaMeiser Dil Shvias Isa Ben B'Machal Adam Ben B'Machal Behema. Because Shvias, it applies by Michael Adam and Michael Behema. Even animal food, the Isser of the restrictions of Shvias apply. Vila Meiser, Michael Adam Isa, Michael Behema Lessa. But by Meiser, it applies to only what's for human consumption, but not for animals. Ulabar kapora, the Tani Klal Gadol b'Maiser, and Abar kapora does learn Gadol b'Maiser. How does that apply? So what is Maiser Gadol relative to what? Is Maiser considered Gadol, great? Gadol Einshe Shel Maiser, Yeser Shel Peah. The restrictions of Maiser are broader more than by Peah. By Peah, to leave the end of the field for the Aniyim. The Ilu Maiser is a B'Teina V'Yer. Because Maiser would apply to Teina, to figs, and to vegetables. Vilu Peah, less of a Teina V'Yer. And by Peah, it does not apply to Teina V'Yer. Disnan, Klal Amru B'Peah, the principle, the rule that was mentioned by Peah, is called Shu Oichel V'Nishmar, anything that is eaten, and anything that is nishmar, that it's protected. V'Gidul Min Ha'aretz, and grows from the ground. And it's harvested at one time, and it's put into storage. The Gemara will explain each and every one of these categories, but that is a klal by peah, that in order to have the chiyuv to leave peah, it has to be produce that falls into all of these categories. So now the Gemara explains. Oichel, we say the first one, it has to be oichel to be chayv and pay. It has to be oichel limutei. What is that coming to exclude? It's coming to include to exclude the roots that are used for dyes. That these types of roots that they use for dyes, these are not eaten. They're not edible. So there's no chiyuv peah. You don't have to leave these over to the aniyim. Rashi explains that it mentions svichim, aftergrowths, because svichim because these types of things, you don't harvest them the year that they're planted. They stay in the ground for several years, and the root now develops and hardens, and it's from that you use it to make dyes. So that's why it's called svichim. And it says specifically these two types, even though it applies to others as well, because these two types are mentioned explicitly in Shvius. So as opposed to by Shvius, where this does apply over there, here by Peah, they're not edible, so it doesn't apply. V'nishmar, it's protected. Limute hefker, something which is hefker, there is no requirement of leaving it for Peah. V'gidul min ha'aretz, and has to grow from the ground. Limute kimina petrios, it's excluding mushroom and truffles. They don't have roots in the ground. They grow on surfaces, and they derive some of their nourishment from the atmosphere, from the moisture. So there's no chiyuv of peah by mushrooms and truffles. It's harvested at one time. That excludes the figs, which are harvested in stages. Taisa says it excludes most fruit, because most fruit is in stages. It mentions this in particular because this is an example where it is done more frequently, it's more in stages, and it's more extreme than by other fruit. That's why it mentions this as an example. However, in all fruit, Taisa says that that's the case, where it's harvested in stages, not at one time, the same p'tur will apply. Umachnisa l'kiyum, and you put it into storage. Limute yerek, which exclude vegetables which are perishable, which are not put into storage. I mean, of course, in those days there was no refrigeration, etc. So naturally, it would be perishable. It would not be able to have to have a kiyum, and therefore the pasuk is memaya. Those things are excluded from the chiyuv of peah. Ve'ilu gabi meiser, however, gabi meiser. Tonight we learned in the Mishnah Klal Amru b'meiser kol shu oichel. Similarly, by meiser it has to be oichel, it has to be edible. V'nishmar, it has to be nishmar, not hefker. V'gidula min ha'aretz, and excludes mushroom trava chay b'meiser. However, ve'ilu l'kitosa ka'achas machnisu l'kiyum loitnan. But these two requirements of that it has to l'kitosa ka'achas, has to be harvested at one time, and it's not perishable, that is not mentioned by Meiser. So therefore, that's why, according to Bar Kapora, it is mentioned also by Meiser. We have a Klal Gadol, because relative to Peah, it's broader. There's no exclusion for the L'kitos Kachas Umachnisa L'kiyum. However, the Chachamim who argue in Bar Kapora, they do not say Klal Gadol by Meiser. Because according to them, the chiyuv by meiser, that we say that it applies to te'enim and to vegetables, that's only midrabanan. Midaraisa, there's no chiyuv by meiser either. So on midaraisa, meiser is not greater than peah. That's why they don't say klal gol. It's only midrabanan. But bar kapara says saif kol saif midrabanan. It is broader. It includes these items which peah does not. Therefore, he says godel by meiser. So now, more goes weiter to explain the Mishnah. The first principle in the Mishnah is that kol hasheicheach ikar Shabbos v'asal malachos harbe b'Shabbos harbe en achai v'lechatas achas. A person who does not know the concept of Shabbos. What does that mean? He does not know about Shabbos. Rav Shmuel Damitavayu. They say both say masnisan betinek shenishlo bein hanochrim v'gershin iskayel bein hanochrim. What we're talking about is a tinuk that nishba, that bein hanochrim, meaning he never knew about Shabbos. It's not that he forgot. He never knew of the existence of Shabbos. It's a tinuk that grew up amongst nochrim, so he was never informed about Shabbos. Or you have a gerish and iskayel bein hanochrim. So the way it's explained, the Meforshim and the Rishonim explain it, it doesn't mean that Nochrim were Magayer him, and Nochrim can't be Magayer him. It means that he had Gerus, but he lived in an area where there weren't Yidden. The Bezdin that was Magayer him, they taught him halachas, but they didn't teach him Shabbos. And he lived in an area where there are no Yidden, so therefore he never knew about Shabbos. So that's what we're talking about, a person who never knew about Shabbos. But if it's talking about a person who was at one point in time in his life informed about Shabbos, but he forgot, then he is chayav for each and every Shabbos. Then he's chayav for each Shabbos. Because that the way they learn is that when we have the Torah, the Gzeres HaKosav that says there's a Shmira Achas L'Shabbos Harbe, we're talking about a person who never knew about Shabbos. Well, therefore, if the step past that is a person who once did know about Shabbos, but then he forgot, that we don't apply Shmira Achas LeShabbos Harbe, we apply Shmira L'chol Shabbos v'Shabbos. So according to this pshat, l'chayra, it's not the way we explained the Mishnah, the way Rashi explained it, that the reason he knows that the next category in the Mishnah that says that Hayadei Iker Shabbos, if he knows the concept of Shabbos, he's chayiv and each Shabbos of Shabbos because he must have found out about Shabbos during the intervening days, during the week he must have found out about Shabbos, is because, according to Rav and Shmuel, he's saying even if a person does not know, he forgot about Shabbos, he's chayiv on each Shabbos. So it's not because he found out about Shabbos during the intervening days. According to Rav and Shmuel, there's a pasuk, the Gzeres HaKosav, that says Shmira Achas L'Shabbos Harbe means a Tinuk Shenishba. He never knew about Shabbos. Memela, where it's Shmira L'chol Shabbos v'Shabbos, a person who knew about the existing Shabbos, whether he was informed about Shabbos during the intervening days or not. The Gzeres HaKosav is that it's a Shmira L'chol Shabbos v'Shabbos. Rashi's explanation in the Mishnah that he discovered about Shabbos during the intervening days, is not going according to Rav and Shmuel. That they would hold that's going according to, if you say that a Shecheach Iker Shabbos means even if a person did once know about Shabbos, but now Lamaisa he does not know about Shabbos. Like upon him, Rav and Shmuel said the Mishnah says that you're chayiv one chatas for many, many Shabbos is only a Tinuk Shenishba, someone who never knew about Shabbos. But if someone did know about Shabbos, he's chayiv for each and every Shabbos, even if all those Shabbos he never realized that today was Shabbos. But they hold if he did know about the existence of Shabbos and he forgot, he's chayav for each and every Shabbos. It says in the Mishnah, the Mishnah's lashon is he forgot Shecheach Iker Shabbos. Doesn't that apply? Doesn't that imply that at one point in time he once knew about Shabbos and then he forgot? It's not mashma that it's a tinuk shenishba that he never knew about it. It says shecheach means that he once knew and he forgot. And what it says like my kol shecheach ikar Shabbos. What does it mean? The haisa shchuach mimena ikar shel Shabbos. It was from him the ikar of Shabbos. The whole concept of Shabbos was not in his consciousness. He never knew about the Iker of Shabbos. He never was informed about it. So this discussion, the Gemara is going to discuss this Rav and Shmuel, and we'll go further on it on the rest of this Amud, and the next Amud discussing this halacha of Rav and Shmuel.